Hello everyone, welcome to Coping with NSU 101, brought to you by NSU TV and radio. I'm your host Maida Munta and I'm thrilled to have you today. We are honored to be joined by a distinguished guest, Dr. Rizwanul Islam, Dean School of Humanities and Social Sciences at North-South University. Sir, welcome to the program. Sir, I recently came across to your article about ECJ's ruling against Malta's Golden Passport program. And sir, I want to know about this issue better. Sir, may I ask you a few questions?
Please.
Sir, what exactly is Golden Passport program about?
Golden Passport scheme, or perhaps a more formal academic title, would be some sort of citizenship by investment, CBI. What it means is it's a fast track to citizenship for very rich people by dint of some form of investment in the country that is offering them citizenship. They will have a fast track citizenship. They may or may not require something else, but in a sense, it is a kind of citizenship by investment, citizenship purchase by money, if I may put it that way.
So why has this issue caused so much controversy within European Union?
It is, although you are talking about the case against Malta by the European Commission, but Malta was not alone. There are similar schemes in Cyprus, in some form in Greece, and you can understand perhaps that these sort of schemes would be frowned upon by citizens and also by civil advocacy groups, because some people feel that citizenship should not be a commercial transaction. It should not be a matter of purchase like we do many other transactions. And surely this would have some concerns about money laundering or evading the reach of one jurisdiction and using EU or some other countries as a safe haven. By that, I'm not saying that all people who may have benefited from this scheme are crooks or they are somehow guilty of some form of wrongdoing, but naturally, people who are born in those countries, people who may have gotten citizenship through a long process,
Yes.
they would be negative about it. They would think that when some people have to wait for so long, they have to go through so much process, that some others could bypass those rules, bypass those norms, and get the citizenship like you buy a property. Then obviously there will be some disquiet, there will be some concerns. Some may be legitimate, some may not be so, but naturally there will be some hue and cry about schemes like this.
Citizenship by investment scheme violates the EU's treaties.
It's a technical thing. In a sense, the European Commission has argued that the Maltese scheme was violating two fundamental provisions. One is Article 20 of the TFEU, or the Treaty on the Functioning of European Union, popularly known as Lisbon Treaty, and also Article 4, Sub-Article 3 of the Treaty on the European Union, technically known as Maastricht Treaty. What are those two articles providing for? Those two articles deal with EU citizenship. First of all, Article 20 is saying that EU citizens, if you are a citizen of an individual EU country, you are also a citizen of EU. And that means you have certain advantages of free movement and other things within the EU. And when it comes to Article 4, Sub-Article 3 of the TEU, or the Treaty on the Functioning of European Union, it says that there is a duty of sincere cooperation, there is a duty of, which is a reciprocal duty, both imposed on the EU and also on its member states, that EU treaties will be complied with in good faith, in a way that both parties will respect their obligations. So EC was arguing that this Article 4 sub-Article 3 had both some sort of positive obligation and also negative obligation. And the kind of citizenship scheme that Malta had introduced, according to the EC, it was too relaxed and it was contrary to the spirit of that Article 4 sub-Article 3, that the genuine relationship that one should have with a EU state to get its citizenship, that was not respected. So they argued that this violates these fundamental EU provisions. Of course, Malta had counter-arguments. One of the arguments that they raised is that what exactly is the meaning of genuine relationship or genuine connection that is not spelled out in the EU treaties. And they argued that it was not within the purview of the EC to fix these norms. These were left to individual states. But of course, the court did not accept the arguments of Malta. The court accepted, in a sense, the arguments of the EC, and the court found that this was an illegal scheme.
So, how did the ECG finds that Malta's citizenship by investment scheme violates EU treaties?
If we have to go at the decision, maybe we should start with the main arguments of the EC and the counter-argument by the Maltese government. So, in a sense, the EC's arguments are based on two particular provisions. One, Article 20 of the TFEU, as I have mentioned, and Article 4 sub-Article 3 of the TEU. So, EC was arguing that the relaxed scheme that Malta was following, that was against the principle that there has to be some sort of genuine relationship, some sort of genuine connection between EU citizen and that citizen's state. Because you could even not stay sufficiently enough in Malta, but you could still get the citizenship of Malta. So EC was saying that Article 20 sub-Article 3 had both positive and negative obligations. So Malta's scheme was corroding the requirement of genuine connection between the state and its citizens. On the other hand, Malta's argument was that what exactly is the meaning of genuine relationship is not really spelled out in any EU treaties. It was left to the individual EU member states that how they frame their laws. And if EC were to intervene in these matters, that would be beyond the powers of the EC. But the court did not accept those arguments. The court found out that this sort of citizenship scheme, which was allowing people to get a EU country's passport so easily, it was a kind of transactional thing. It was not something that was enough to establish a genuine connection between state and its citizens. So the ECJ ruled out against the scheme by Malta.
So is it ethically justificable to treat citizenship as a commodity that can be bought?
Well, it depends on your perspective. Some people have argued that where we are born, it's not a matter of our achievement. It's pure chance. You and I could have been born in some other country that would have allowed us to travel maybe much more easily than as Bangladeshis we can. So they want to argue that when you are investing, if you can invest in commercial enterprises, why can't you invest in citizenship? Sort of the argument that if you can pay for a club membership, why, if that is okay, why not you could buy a passport if you have that money, if you have that motivation. Now, I am not a big fan of those arguments. I don't buy those arguments because let's take a step further. If I talk about company management or ownership of a company, we understand that it is not by any democratic principle. Just to make it simple, let's say we have 100 shareholders in a company, but only one of them has 99% shares. And the rest of the shareholders, the 99 others, they have just 1% shareholding in the company. That would mean that in all practical matters, unless the company's shares are in a particular way that there can be voting shares or non-voting shares. But this is not a talk on company law, so I'll focus again back to our scenario, that if that one person is ruling the company, we don't object because company is for investors, because that's a commercial transaction, that's a commercial dealing. Now, if we follow that principle in a democratic country, would we say that if you pay more taxes, should you have more voting rights? I think everyone will object to that idea. So personally, I'm not sure that this is a kind of ethical, correct way of dealing with citizenship. But I guess this is a matter for broader debate. This is a matter on which perspectives can differ. But I personally think that we should not be allowed to buy citizenship. But that's just my way of looking at it. Others may have different views.
So these type of programs mainly benefit the wealthy. How do they weaken the true meaning of citizenship?
So that's a great question, I guess. So if we talk about citizenship, are we thinking of some sort of political bonding, some sort of natural bonding, or are we talking about shopping? I guess when we think of citizenship, we think of a connection between the state and the citizens. That you or I are born in certain countries, or even naturalization, that people go in other countries, they achieve their degrees, they get assimilated in the workforce, then they start paying taxes, they apply through a process, it takes a time, often they have to undergo some sort of language requirement. So in a way, it's an immersion in another culture, in another place. So those are acceptable, or in some cases, in some rare cases, I would say maybe sporting heroes. At least I can think of Gordon Greenidge in this country. We offered Gordon Greenidge an honorary citizenship. So either it has to be, or traditionally it has been about some natural connection that based on the place of birth of a person, or the place of birth of that person's parents, or through some form of long stay as a visitor, some form of employment, people have gotten citizenship. So when we think of citizenship, perhaps we do not automatically think of it as a commercial transaction or something that can be purchased. So I think that in a sense, when you are opening it up in a very relaxed way to people who can just pay for it, who can just buy it, then the meaning of citizenship gets somehow diluted. Because then what's the difference between buying a company or buying a passport? I do not see that difference. So to me, it looks a bit awkward.
Yes, sir. So at a time when many refugees are struggling to gain legal protection, what message does it send when the rich can simply buy it?
Well, a sort of double standard perhaps, but hasn't that always been the case? When Ukrainians, they were moving to Europe, some European policymakers were saying that these are not normal refugees from Africa or from Asia. They are Europeans, they are like us. And generally, most Europeans were warmly embracing them. But when it comes to persecuted people from Africa or Asia, people of different colors, their reception in the EU or in other parts of the world hasn't been the same. So yes, there is clearly some sort of, I would say, double standard, some sort of special arrangement. There's no doubt about that, I would imagine. So surely the message is that if you are persecuted, we are not to perturb about you, but if you have the money, then our door is open. I think that message is inevitable. That message is clear.
Yes, sir. What kind of reforms could ensure that citizenship remains a meaningful connection between a people and a country, rather than a financial transaction?
Well, I wish I had a solid answer. So maybe I could think of different scenarios. One is when there is this sort of scheme, there is always some sort of backlash against them. So, for example, to my limited knowledge, in Australia, in I think Greece, I'm not entirely sure of Greece, but in Australia and in some other countries, they are changing their schemes, they are modifying their schemes. So when people who are born in a country, when they would see that this citizenship is a kind of commercial transaction, and for some countries it's a big business. I think if I talk about Dominica, their annual earning from selling passports is more than their earning from taxes. So if that is so, it's a lucrative deal for some countries. For a small country like Vanuatu, I think it makes commercial sense to sell their passports. So there is clear incentive, at least for some countries, to continue this scheme. So if that is the case, I think one hope is that there will be some sort of domestic backlash, that people will reject these schemes, they will push their policymakers to make a change. If I talk about law or international law as a student of law, maybe that's something that I can share with you. Even this case, although some people may see it as an issue of international law, but in a sense, to me, it is all about the interpretation of EU law. If I may mention an old case decided by the International Court of Justice just after the Second World War, there was this guy called Notebohm. He was of Guatemalan descent. I think he was born in Germany, but he had Guatemalan descent. And he had some investment, he had some properties in Guatemala. Now, during the Second World War, Guatemala was a part of the Allied forces. So Guatemala acquired his property because he was an enemy alien, so his property could be expropriated. Guatemala did so. But this Mr. Notebohm, he was also a citizen of Liechtenstein. So Liechtenstein went to the International Court of Justice because Liechtenstein was not a part of the Axis forces. And Liechtenstein argued that as it was not a part of the Allied forces, its citizens' property could not be acquired by Guatemala. Now, ICJ was in this situation that this guy had a citizenship of Germany, and he also had a citizenship of Liechtenstein. And essentially, as you know, and I'm sure most of our listeners would know, that citizenship is a matter for national law, it's not a matter for international law. Although there is some change, there is some dialogue about statelessness, but that's a different issue. But if I come back to this, in that situation, the court had to deal with the question that which citizenship is effective. So, I don't know, maybe in some future case, the ICJ or some other court may have to grapple with this kind of schemes where people are effectively allowed to buy citizenship like we buy a membership in a particular group. So how that court gives a ruling, I don't know. If the court gives a ruling, there may be a precedent, there may be some sort of impetus. There may be another way that there may be some sort of international treaty, but again, as the interests are so divergent and citizenship still remains mostly a matter of national law, it's difficult to see that there will be an international treaty in the coming days. We don't have the benefit of a crystal ball, but I don't think that we are going to see any real change in the international legal front, on the international legal front in any time soon. But probably for now, the citizens' pressure would work, or would work in some countries, and some of the groups who are fighting corruption, who are fighting money laundering, they are also challenging some of these schemes, because these schemes have the potential to help money laundering, or to help people avoid justice in one country and stay in another country. So from those quarters, there may be a backlash, there may be some push, but exactly when or how this is going to change, we don't know. I think that would be a fair answer.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your time to give us some valuable advice. We are honored to have you in Coping with NSU 101. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you all for watching. We hope you enjoyed this conversation and maybe got inspired to explore your academic interest. Until next time, take care, stay safe. I'm Maida Muntaha, signing off from NSU TV and Radio.